I now call the December 2023 Museum of Cultural Arts Commission to order. Francesca, do you want to make the roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Castagna,
Here.
Commissioner Kimsey. Here. Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Sovereign,
Here.
Commissioner Witowski,
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Evans is absent.
So I have approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any questions or any comments to that?
I move approval.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
And for information on participating in today's meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on the meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. We do ask that attendees keep phones and devices muted, and thank you for participating in your local government. And
I don't think we have any public comments. Anybody here? Anybody online? No. So then we'll move into to the agenda, and I received an update on the expanded path of history.
Let me get on my mic. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so as we've been working on this expanded path of history with Page and Turnbull, we did the 2 walking meetings a couple months back and asked for them to finalize a report. I did send an update of the report, just not all of the findings, but I sent an update on the activities in the report to the Community Foundation for Monterey County, because we have to file a report for the funds that they gave, which was $30,000 for this project. So I did file that because that was due November 30th. So that was essentially the activities that we did, and that we have some draft paths that have been identified. We received the documents, a 114-page document from them regarding the expanded path of history, and I gave it to our retired museums and cultural arts manager, Dennis Copeland, for Dennis to review for accuracy, and Dennis provided several updates for them, and we've sent that into Page and Turnbull to provide updates for that final report. So I was hoping to have that by this week, but I don't, so that'll be coming. The final report will be on the next meeting. But I just wanted to kind of have a couple talks on, I can talk about some of the sites that they're potentially added. I could just list them off right now, and we can talk more about it when we get the report. Some of the sites that were identified on the current path are the Semino House on Van Buren Street, Miller Adobe, the Few House, Ordway Block Building, Freeman's Mortuary, and that's Monterey Museum of Art now, Monterey County Bank, Bergsticker House, First Presbyterian Church, the Carnegie Library, which is now operated by Middlebury Institute. That's on 425 Van Buren, Roderick House, Monterey Firehouse and Calle Principal, Hank Ketchum Studio, Christian Science Reading Room, Sherman Rose Inn, J.C. Anthony Building, Professional Building on between Franklin and Calle Principal, Mary Corning Winslow Black Studio House, the Monterey Post Office, and then there are the 2 additional walks, which were partially what we did when we walked out there in the community, with additions and comments on there. So some of these, the document that I have here has not been updated as of yet, but we do have the new Monterey area. And we have the Japanese American Citizen League Hall. The intersection of East Franklin and Washington was where the start was, the walk was at. Jack's Park, the Watanabe House, Sunrise Market, the USO Building, Royal Presidio Chapel, Marsh's Oriental Art Store, Lake El Estero, the El Estero Presbyterian Church, the African American USO Building, the First French Consulate, which is the First French Consulate is on the list right now, but it has been kind of taken off the markers recently. And Pete's Net Storage looks like on here, and let's see if I have anything else? And let me pop this open. Sorry, this is the. Okay. And then let's get there. And so that was the Pearl District. There are some notes from Dennis. We'll be updating on that map. And the new Monterey area, we have a number of items. The looks like the Bear Flag Building, the Monterey Canning Company, Pacific Biological Laboratories, Wing Chong Building, Sea Pride Packing,
Mhm.
Cannery Worker Shacks, site of the Lone Star Cafe, the home of Joan Kwakmui, Mariposa Hall, Carpenters Labor Union Hall, 799 Hawthorne, the Colburn House, St. Mark Orthodox Church, Monterey Peninsula Hospital on Lighthouse, the Green Mansion, the new Monterey Branch Library, the Anais Sardine Products Company. And I thought that Dennis had some additions on here. I'm trying to think on here. Maccabee Beach and the Monterey Fishing and Canning Company at 570 Cannery Row and Mariposa Hall as well. So those are some of the sites that we've added in for the report. Like I said, I'll have the full report for the commission at the next meeting. I'm hoping to get everything back to them. With that, once we get this report in, I think on my side, getting content in digitally and getting expanded paths and whether we want to adopt this and start adding things in so we can start adding additional walks on there. Because I think the physical sites and doing the interpretive panels and all that would be something for us to work on. But like, you know, the markers, the physical things are going to be much further down the road. So I think at the next meeting, I'm going to discuss, as well as adopting the project, what the next steps are for implementation so people become aware of it. Like, what are the changes? Do we do new maps? Do we do, because we're in the process of, we send out things for the Explore Monterey brochures. And those Explore Monterey brochures have some of the older information about the different museums in the area, the on-sale tour, which is no longer available. So I want to update all of that content. So if we can discuss some of that at the next meeting, I think it'd be really helpful for us.
Yeah.
So 2 questions, Brian. First question, don't we have a subcommittee on this? And would it be helpful to have a subcommittee meeting of the report and before it goes to the final commission?
Sure. Now we can do that. If you guys, once I get this report come back, and I'd be happy to meet. I think that would be best because if we're meeting the next meeting in January, I would imagine either the week of the 11th or the 18th, if you are not out of town, that would be great for us.
And it might be helpful to have Dennis if he's available and we have the money. Yeah. And the second question, early on when we talked about this, we kicked around the idea of, you know, they have a central place for each area. And I think we even mentioned Griffin Plaza right in front of East Village, where if you remember the kiosk sign that we have up at the Lower Presidio. So it describes the district. It lays out, you know, some of the things and say, walk down this street. And we could also have a place where brochures could be given out so that people, because a lot of people go to that. It's right there by East Village and Melville, and it's a good location to have a central sign there introducing the Pearl District. I mean, there may be one on the other end, like you said, down by Lake El Estero or the French consulate, somewhere down there too, where there are a lot of pedestrians.
Yeah, and I think that'd be great to discuss in terms of the, you know, the kind of the areas for signage. And I do believe those would probably be going into the planning department as next, like once we get kind of an area that for the next steps for the maps and the updating the sites. I'm just thinking like the specific markers are on there, but like East Village Coffee is the Washington Hotel. And that is technically on the site of the Path of History, but markers. So a lot of those markers, the MHAA markers, which are the shape, the Colton Hall shape, like that one's been missing for years. And there's a lot of those that are missing off of those sites. So I think if getting whatever we do we have to basically get it out there so people can see it And I think either take a photo and access that map, like, in a couple different places, or download content so they can find out more information about our history.
Brian, did I detect that the on-sale service is no longer being provided?
So OnSell was the one that got taken over by Story, and that's the one where we've created the app, and the app is launched on Apple and Google. And so you could download the Monterey walking tour. That's the one I've been working on, that actually has a tour of the different path of history, the El Encinal Cemetery, the public art. That's the one I walked through a couple months back in another commission meeting, but that was about that. So OnSell itself, where a lot of the maps sent you to a website, or if you called like those little panels that are around town that say like, call this number. If you call the number is still valid. If you go to the website on those signs, the website is not, because OnSell is defunct and the company Story has taken them over. So that website that people would go through or download a QR code on a lot of these signs that are interpretive all around town for our sites, those have to be updated, because those will tell people. So if people go to a site, like you'll see one at, maybe Casa Sobranes, or, you'll see one at Monterey Public Library that are on path of, kind of on these sites, which the on-sale tour, and, or Cannery Row Worker Shacks. Those things are not all up to date right now.
I'm sorry, they're not, what?
They're not up to date. So basically, for example, if you have a website and the website address does not, if that website address goes dead, basically,
Yeah.
it's not forwarding to the new site, because the new site OnSell is no longer in business. So the company that has taken it over is called Story.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to basically update all of those individual little signs, which are, maybe 6 by 8 inches all around town. So that just says like, download the app or call this number for this tour. And that would take them to the current site so they could download or call the phone. So we need to update part of that too. And I think that'd be part of the discussion for next month. But the content we still have all the content, and people are still using it in Story.
Okay.
Thank you.
Has the proposal so far been coordinated with the Historic Preservation Commission?
We invited them, and they came out on the walks, and they came out during the discussions, but this was not brought to them. This has not been brought to them at this time. And I've talked with them about the planning staff about coming to a future HPC meeting about content.
All right.
But the thought was not getting the timeline for getting this project and getting Page and Turnbull's finished report. We had a specific timeline and deadline in terms of working with Community Foundation for Monterey County for expending the funds. So we wanted to get all of that. We can work with them on the next level.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Greenie?
I have one question too. So,
Yeah.
so the idea, I think that Bill's idea of putting kiosks in is a terrific idea. But that goes to the cost, and producing that kind of thing and producing brochures are we looking for another grant to produce, to be able to do that kind of thing?
So the brochures we have that in our current budget.
Right.
So we've just been distributing, and the brochures are basically what you'll see that say Explore Monterey, and you'll see those in hotels, airports, just different community buildings. And we already have a contract with a company that distributes those. So we need to go in and print. We do probably need a design, and we could, based on the cost of the design, we have that, but we do have printing costs in our budget for that. Now, for a kiosk, it depends on whether we want to look at either A, asking for a grant, or B, going through, depending on the cost and installation, whether I would ask for that in an upcoming budget or something like that. So I don't know how much some of those things, like Bill, if, for Old Monterey, how much if they could spend up there Presidio. Is that kind of numbers right there would be helpful, because I've seen there are, they wouldn't fit in every kind of areas, but there are companies that do technology, kind of solar powered e-ink or, electronic ink, kind of like what you would see on a Kindle. And they do things like that, which would map, and then you could basically rotate the content and update it so it's not a static poster. Or if you wanted to advertise an event, so if you wanted to do something like that in an area and change out, or you can have we could think about that, or you could do the panel. So there's the panel, there's digital panels, there's e-ink panels. There's a couple different options that are out there. And I do think some of them may not fit into certain kind of historic districts. So that would be another kind of conversation for another commission.
Anybody else? And no public comment? So I guess we'll move on to receive the collection assessment for preservation report.
And that is me. So this was we worked on this earlier in the year, and it's just been quite busy trying to get everything with the library and museums always going. But I want to thank Commissioners Sovereign and Castagna for assisting with us on this, going out with the assessor. So the collection assessment for preservation was a grant we had to basically look at our facilities over at Colton Hall, the old jail, and the vault. So I added the vault because that's where we hold our collections for different items. So we went through, and there was a building assessor and a collections assessor, and they walked through and gave us a number of different recommendations on here. The report is attached on here. And I know I've sent it out to the subcommittee in the past on here. But Colton Hall, a number of the reports have been gone through over times. And some of these things, I will say right now, I'm working with engineering on NCIP for Colton Hall repointing in certain areas. And there is funding allocated for Colton Hall repointing. And there is a Save America's Treasures grant that's due December 12th. So if I have time this weekend, I might be able to work on that grant, because that would be one-to-one matching funds. And we have funds right now to handle the repointing in certain areas. So what the repointing is that in the 1970s, when there was maintenance done on Colton Hall, they put in the new grout and they used Portland cement, which is harder than the rock. And so what happens is when we have these heavy storms and the water soaks into the walls, it soaks into the grout, and the grout is harder than the stone, and it actually crushes the stone. So you want grout that's actually softer than your stone. Now, the old jail is from granite stone from Point Lobos, and it's solid. It's not having the same problem, but there are drainage issues on there. So long-term, there are drainage issues that are potential for the building based on the slope. So that's a possibility for looking at, and that is in the report in terms of the, kind of the dampness in the building. But there's some of these this is, to me, the primary recommendations, especially on the building side, are really important to look at if we are looking at a grant, because it highlights things like a landscape plan for the old jail courtyard. Because you go to the old jail, it's below the ground line. It's recessed. So that's why it gets a lot of water and a lot of moisture in those areas. But we do luckily have a plan for some of these things. That's the handrail to the wall side of the eastern stairways. Some of those things are just that if you go to Colton Hall, the railing is not of ADA height, of course, because when it was built in when the staircase was built in the 1880s, we didn't have ADA, of course. But there are some different longer term recommendations on here, and specifically for that room. One thing you will notice also is that for Christmas in the Adobes, we are not using candles this year. We are using LED candles, which are replicas. We do not have fire suppression in Colton Hall upstairs. So my fear is that something were to happen in that building, it would, one accident over there with the candle with a fire could be really critical. So we've got the LED candles going, and we'll have those going through. And I think that's just going to be a safer way to go through. The ceiling in that building is not historic. It is, drywall as well. So there are opportunities for us to look at these in the future. But this is really, I think for me, if there's any strong feelings about anything on this, the other part I would say is that there are some great recommendations for the storage and care inside of the vault, of how we're doing things with our photographs and the sleeves and just different things that can happen. And that when we get our new artifact specialist, I think those are some of the things that I would really like to do, is kind of work through that vault collection and clean it up and get some of those in better storage. But, you know, we are working on some new interpretation through the jail and some of these other things, but happy to answer any questions. I don't know if any folks have had a chance to read through.
I thought there was a seismic retrofit of all of Colton Hall, wasn't it?
It was, and I think that was on, so Steve Barnett, who did the building assessment, I think it was just in terms of a later, another assessment on it underneath. I forget why, because he was looking underneath on the first floor to the second floor.
Huh.
Because I know things like the chimneys are concreted in, and there's some of that other work has been happening.
Well, the one issue I have is with the long term, I mean, this is sort of divided up into building construction issues, right? And then there's program issues. And he says long-term recommendations should be the program issues. And I think we've emphasized that before. It'd be great. I mean, when you look under the history of Colton Hall, one of the first things you see is a classroom. That does not hit you when you go to Colton Hall there. And you know, could we do anything, even on an incremental stage, to highlight the classroom aspects of it? I've also said, I just think it's fairly minor. And Dennis Copeland had showed me one of the brochures just to show the history of the capitals of California. I think we get visitors from different states, different countries, and it's so simple to do. There was a brochure, I think Sacramento actually has one. But who knows, like, where the heck Benicia is, and why was it chosen, and just a simple. So some changes to make it more interesting, and I just hope that somehow we can come up with grants or whatever. So those aren't long-term recommendations; they're more, I don't know, next 1 to 3 or 4 years that we're able to implement some of them. I mean, it doesn't have to be a Taj Mahal, but if we could just make it more interesting.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, this is the focus of this report is not on programming. The focus on this report is really, it's a FAIC is looking at how people are caring for their collections. Like, are you storing things properly? Do you have things in there? Like, is the facility secure? Is the facility safe? And those kind of things. So I think he just touches on those based on kind of the discussion there. The classroom, I will say, you know, the classroom was mostly, you know, some of those were downstairs too. And we've had the classroom exhibit upstairs for I don't know how long. You know, the Josie Simino and some of the other ones that are in there, those are on the display panels, and those are probably 20 plus years old. Those things need to be replaced, because people that have been in there in Colton Hall in the past, and just they need to be updated, because if they've seen it for every single time they've been in there. And that's kind of in that where the staff area is. So, like, you know, there's the main museum hall, but upstairs there are the locking cases. And the locking cases in there have a lot of those photos and documents that are from, and there's a big, large Chautauqua case in there as well. Those are all basically the schools, but I don't get people in there really interested in the schools of the school history, the first school history of Monterey. When they come in there, they want to hear about the founding of Monterey and these other things. So I do think that could be part of it, but it shouldn't be like the focus on the schools. And
but I don't think there's enough interest because it isn't highlighted enough. Too bad Bob's not here. I know Bob, you know, went on that tour of various museums, and he came back with ideas like iPad. You know, as soon as you walk in, you could say, "Oh, do you want to see the history of the first schoolhouse in California?" And somebody pulls out an iPad and looks at it or whatever.
Well, I think, you know, my thought on those, a lot of those things is that those don't need to be docent or staff directed, because the majority of museums that you go to right now, you can either go with a, you know, walk and talk with a person, but most of the time you're going to walk in there and interact yourself. So if there's a panel, it's something that you go through and you could slide through a history, right? You can go through a timeline, slide through a history. One of my favorite museums was the Constitution Museum in Philadelphia. Constitution Museum is a fantastic museum and just has so much different history and exhibits, and it's got a lot of digital content as well that you can go through and experience and kind of see that. So I do think those kind of things, but those panels that we have, those cases are from Byron Oliver. You know, those were designed basically since then. And then I don't think the displays have been changed in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the old jail. I actually went through and changed up the laminated paper that was in there. Those text has not been changed since 1987, at least. So those things have not been updated in quite some time. So a lot of those things, I would imagine those might be the same era as well. So yeah, they are definitely due for an update. I don't think it needs to be tied to this, to a report. I think it needs to be tied to, this is ongoing maintenance and work that has to happen to make the place more interactive.
I think though that, again, Bill's comment about the wandering state capitol actually is very interesting. And actually the story why Monterey was not the state capital is fascinating. Most people don't know why. And actually, there have been whole books written about it. But I think a little bit of sure. I get that all the time on my walking tours. Oh, Monterey was the state capital. I said, no, it wasn't. And I explained to them why it wasn't. But that kind of thing could be done with a brochure or even with a panel to explain why and do that.
And there was a group of, you probably know the history better, Tim. There's a group of heavy hitters that bought the site across from Del Monte Center.
It's right.
My Pebble Beach company. And it was always called the old Capitol site.
Right.
What the heck was it called the old Capitol site for? They were trying to get it back to Monterey.
That's right.
Some time ago.
Yeah, all until 1969 when they finally said no.
Yeah.
To me, the most important long-term goal, which they reference, and it's been an idea that's been obvious and around for quite a while, is to make the entire building plus the hyphen simply historical offices and a classroom, to consolidate the collections from the vault, bring that into the building in a climate-controlled environment, and so to put everything in one place rather than have it distributed the way it is now. And there's no reason to have the offices on the first floor used the way they are now. They should be part of the museum complex. That's going to be a tough sell, obviously.
Right.
And
No,
space issue, yeah.
absolutely. And I will say, you know, as I'm not sure if everyone has been through the whole building, but there is, you know, the hyphen, which was built. If you look at Colton Hall, and then there's the hyphen in between the jail, and that's a different stone. There is a different stone in between those two. And that was built for the court, so you could walk from the court to the jail. And when you're inside the building in there, you can actually see it, because the old jail, there are additional cells right now. There are additional space, you know, there are cells, but they're actually right now, they're used for planning and they're used for storage.
I would like to make a comment. I read with interest the Colton Hall Museum and Jail Report by Stephen Farniff. And I particularly noted the primary recommendation and executive summary on page 3, which stated the potential for more dynamic educational and tourist attractions are not being completely realized, which I think we all know. And this is a tourist city. We need to address that. It's reiterated on pages 4, 5, 8, 17, and 19. And in fact, on page 8, they recommend that it be considered for National Trust designation, which would be a lot of work, but I think it's something we should investigate. I would like to agendize a proposal to establish a 501c3 called Colton Hall and Museums Constituency. That name can be whatever. I just picked that out. To address the issues and fundraise to support the recommendations, much like the Friends of the Library have done such a beautiful job, I think, with the library programs. And I am willing to personally pursue these goals on behalf of the commission and report back to the commission at the February meeting if I could get consent of the commission.
I would say on something like a 501c3, because it's not, a 501c3 is not a government agency, right?
Exactly.
And so with that, that would be something to work with the potential with legal counsel for the city of Monterey, because the 501c3, a 501c3 can be formed
Yes.
right now by people without having a agreement. So the way that the work is going with the Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation is that they have their own 501c3, and we are working on an MOU between that 501c3 directly with the library and the city. So that would potentially be, then I would work through, I mean, that would be a discussion on there. I don't know if that would be something that would be formed directly by a commission, because the 501c3 would be something that's, I don't know if there would be a conflict of interest, and that would be something to go with legal counsel to ask them about if there was conflict of interest with a commission forming a 501c3 that had financial ability. I just don't know. So I mean, that's why I would hesitate putting something like that on an agenda without having a clear legal guidance whether we could or could not do something like that.
All right. Could I meet with the general counsel then and discuss that?
Well, I mean, I could talk with them. They're working on a number of different projects on there too, but we
I'm
can.
sure they are.
Yeah.
I just think this is such a beautiful place and we have so much to offer. And we aren't offering, as they said, all the things we could. It's a tourist environment here, and that's where our money comes from. We need to address those issues, and I would love to do that.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, there's a lot of, you know, different museums they're funded quite, they're all different in terms of how they're funded. And as we'll see here in Monterey, a lot are funded by, you know, private grants or individuals and donations. And Colton Hall is free to attend, right? So we're not going to make money through, we're not going to make money from Colton Hall in terms of, you know, the cost for the staffing or increased displays or all those things. So we do need another revenue source in terms of getting those kind of things. Like if we're going to increase, you know, the digital displays and working on a lot of exhibits and what do we actually want to do, those things can cost quite a bit of money. So I think that we need another source. We do need a source of revenue to get that.
And are you saying then that you object to trying the National Trust and the 501c3, or we could look at those things and see what we could do?
You can see what we could do. The National Trust, you mean the National Trust for Historic Preservation?
Yes. And that's going to be, I'm sure, a very big mountain to climb, but it's something that I would be willing to.
Well, and I will say, so something like Colton Hall is under, so I don't know exactly on some of these things, but I know that we are in the, you know, a National Historic District,
Yes.
but Colton Hall is on the State Register of Historic Places. So the Office of Historic Preservation in the state of California is who you register with regarding your designation of a historic place. And so with that, they then register through nationally, so Pacific Biological Laboratories is national registered, while the entire downtown, Old Town Monterey is a national district. So we fall under, Colton Hall falls under the national jurisdiction of that, but not a specific place. And so, and I think the National Trust for Historic Preservation, they have worked, I know they worked with Pacific Biological Laboratories before to do some
And
restoration work.
Cooper Malera.
Right, and Cooper Malera, which there's a private public partnership as well.
Yes.
That's going on there. So what would that change for Colton Hall being it is a city run building as well, because the bottom floor is city run? That I don't know, because that would be a larger kind of run of whether they ran that or not.
Can we pursue that, or?
I have a question. Are we looking for the National Trust for Historic Preservation to take over the operation of the building?
No.
No. So,
But there are many grants and such that they provide. They're currently, I belong, and they're doing a lot of Black churches now. They're trying to restore Black churches. There are very focuses where they can provide money to do things. I'm sure they have many, many requests, but you don't get a yes if you don't ask the question
Yeah.
first.
if we have something like a 501c3, we can explore a lot of funding
A
sources.
lot of funding
Yes.
solutions such as, Monterey gives and such, but unless you're in that position, you can't do that.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I would say I'm gonna look through there right now, but I do know it really depends on what kind of funds you're looking for, what specifically are you,
Hmm.
what are you specifically looking for? I mean, that's not really tied specifically, National Trust for Historic Preservation is not really
No,
tied
that
specifically
was
to the
one of the
report.
recommendations.
So I
that they
think
made.
we have to make sure that we're following the report
Mhm.
as well, right?
Mhm.
Rather than providing any guidance on something about going outside. But
I think
um,
we have had things such as the music performances. It would be wonderful to reinstitute and such. I always enjoy going to those, and I think they were very well attended. In fact, there were more people wanting to come than we had seats. But with this plan to maybe reimagine that whole upstairs area, there may be more seats, more available, and a chance for more revenue.
seats are, I mean, when you're dealing with a historic building
Mhm.
and seats are determined by number, also you have the fire inspector. So you've got a number of exits, number of entrances, exits, total square feet. So it's not really like a theater setup. And if you want, those are historic floors.
Mhm.
Those are historic benches of some take. So we can do benches versus seats. So we have a seated capacity versus bench capacity.
Mhm.
But going back, those kind of things are not really the focus of this report.
Exactly.
We have to focus on kind of the reports, but the funding as well about what exactly, what grants specifically we need to know about. Like, yes, there are a lot of activities and yes, there are a lot of things to focus on, but priorities in terms of staffing and how we can actually do these things, how we can actually run. Because if we're going to do a seating program, who's bringing up 90 chairs in there?
Mhm. I understand. it.
Well, I mean, that's
Another
what I mean.
issue
That's
of the
really,
501c3 if
that's
we could get
for
some
us.
funds
For me, I want to focus right now on getting the report in terms of like, is there anything
for the
sticking out
report.
regarding the
Mhm.
report for this of adopting this, but then figuring out, volunteers to help with programs, 501c3, if that's the way to go, or a volunteer group that can help run these kind of things and hire, because the Friends and Foundation for the library do run their own programs and they do run their own events
Exactly.
through us. So that is a possibility, but they're all things that we need to figure out because those groups have to have their own insurance. They have to have their own liability insurance, workers' comp insurance. They have to have separate address. There are certain things that they have to have a board, regular meetings. So a lot of those things, and that's not the focus really of this report. And the grant for National Trust for Historic Preservation, the reason I was mentioning before the grant for NCIP, that's through grants.gov, and that is a federal grant for historic places, which is a 1-to-1 match for preservation on historic places.
Mhm.
And so right now, if we have $158,000, for example, for Colton Hall restoration based on NCIP funding, if I can do a 1-to-1 match, that is potentially 158 or more that we can get from federal fund.
Mhm.
So we have to, yes, there are grants that are out there. No, they're not easy to get
Mhm.
because they all take people to write the grant, people to report on the grant, people to do all the work on the grant. And that's not commission work. That's not commission work to do those things. And who's applying for the grant is also limited. So who can apply for a grant is often limited to, are you the actual agency? Are you a national agency? Are you a state agency? Are you a local agency? A lot of grants have different specifics for who
Yes.
can actually apply and be the agent for that thing. So
Mhm.
that's the capacity for me or for my staff is really not so much there in terms of applying for all of these grants if we don't have the folks to follow through with it.
So,
I support Renee's proposal. I realize you're understaffed and I think February is too optimistic a time, but at least for us to look at the different alternatives. Also, I'd like to throw out a name. There's a woman, a lawyer who's quite an expert on nonprofits. She helped us set up the Old Monterey Foundation. I think she would give you some free time if you wanted to talk to her. Not to say that Chrissy Davy, our city attorney, doesn't know it, but this woman specializes in nonprofits. She's done 3 or 4 or 5 of them locally, and her name is Virginia Holland. And she's in the old professional building Kelly P. and Franklin. And she worked with us to set up the Old Monterey Foundation. And as Brian said, there is a lot to it. There's the insurance and all those other matters. And also, as Brian said, the Friends of the Library Foundation Board, which I'm a member of, is distinct from the library board. They
Exactly.
communicate, but they're separate.
Exactly. But if we don't start somewhere, we're never going to start. And I think we need to explore this, see
Yeah.
what's possible. I mean, maybe we can't, but this did address those issues. And I think, they aren't mutually exclusive. Brian is way ahead on so many of these things it's critical to maintain that structure and the very valuable things that we have in the collection. But I think we can also look at some other things, at least the initial phase. I'll be happy to talk to the attorney and this person that you suggested. And I do have other people who've done 501c3s who are willing to work with me, but I think we need to at least have a plan and see what we can and can't do. And maybe we can't do this, but how do we know if we don't investigate it?
My initial, as I read through this, is there's a lot of work here and there's a lot of cost. So how is the city, the rest of the city who finances these things, looking at this report? It's not that we should just go out and do all this work, because we can't do it without the money. And if we waited for the budget to catch up to do all of this work, it'll be a long time. So something like a 501c3 might solve that problem. I don't know if you've gotten any reaction from the rest of the city staff yet.
Well, I will say, as you may have seen on here, a number of these projects have been brought up over time. Like Colton Hall has a number of studies compared to other city buildings. It's been really researched quite a bit. And so I think that's overall the maintenance has been fairly good. And there are things just based on the age and kind of the location that need to be addressed. And that's why I'm happy we're addressing the repointing and those kind of issues. And I know sites like the old jail were on an NCIP in the past, and that I believe it was pulled, but those are kind of things where, like, do we want to look at those as projects to propose? If there are other things like this, do we want to propose things like this at the next round of NCIP for updates to things of Colton Hall as well? That's another option to really focus on. Commissioners could submit a request for something like regarding something from this regarding Colton Hall in a future NCIP project.
I'm confused as to the status of where we are right now. I thought I heard a motion to agendize discussion of starting a support organization of some sort. Has that been seconded or voted?
Well, there was no formal motion.
That's not how we're making that's not how we make the agenda either. But then also that kind of thing, which is a 501c3, is not something that's going to be decided by this commission, is my understanding. Basically, because what we need to find out with that is that the 501c3 is a separate organization that's not going to be run by this commission, because that, to me, and I will check with the city attorney, but that to me is a conflict of interest to have this commission decide on who is running or what we're doing on that kind of thing. The 501c3 is a separate organization, a support agency that has their own board, that has their own bylaws, their own rules, and then potentially has an agreement. So if there's a group that's out there, that's the thing. The guidance is for me is to work with the city and city attorney for researching on that. How does that partnership and relationship happen? But I don't think having the group here forming that or coming up with that is the best way.
But I think there's a step that is to say that we need something other than what we have as our toolbox right now. Not that we will do it ourselves, but that somebody should or You know, we need more tools. We're toolless. We're staffless. We're moneyless. We're toolless. We've got to have something to help us, in my opinion.
And I think we all kind of agree with that, in that, as I understand it, then we'll look further into the idea of developing a 501(c) nonprofit.
Yeah.
And see what we can go from there.
Right. It's just a matter of how does that group interact with the commission? How does that group interact with the city? And I don't want to get into having this directive as a directive from the city or the commission to do that when that group needs to be independent, is my understanding. My understanding is that 501(c)(3) should be independent, the same way our library friends and foundation are an independent group with an independent board from there that can make the decisions. And we have a MOU, we have a memorandum of understanding with them for programming and use and funding.
But initially, when they were formed, I think, what was their source? I think it came from the library, the 1849 group.
Yeah.
Was that a commission? I wasn't here then, but
They are independent, but some impetus to look at having somebody do this, I believe came from the library. But and again,
Here's your mic.
I think
Usually-
we're talking about this
Mike needs a mic.
exploring how to find some additional capabilities.
Any more comments? All right, I guess we move on to the last item, which is receive Museum and Cultural Arts Division activity report.
All right. So let me get there. All right. We'll go through on this. If you guys have any questions, let us know. The attendance numbers are here for Colton Hall and the old jail for each month, September, October, November. The AED, automated external defibrillator, was installed at Colton Hall. I changed out the light bulbs upstairs in the displays to LED because they were halogen, which can be damaging to different documents. We held our Constitution Convention reenactment. We had a youth music program, poetry program out there at Colton Hall. And at the old jail, I've added a new mannequin in there in the back. So if you haven't been in there recently, go take a look at that. And the interpretive panels are going to be updated. So I'm going to be working on updating all those inside of the jail. And Francesca Garibaldi has been working on preparations for Christmas in the Adobes. And that's, if you are not volunteering or attending, please do so. We're looking for volunteers, I believe, Saturday, 7 to 9. And thanks to the Rotary Club, the Monterey Pacific Rotary Club, for helping to decorate outside of Colton Hall once again. Pacific Biological Laboratories, I think we saw an increase of interest in there with the arrival of the Western Flyer. And so we were out there for the homecoming weekend and opened additional tours that weekend, and were able to provide tours for the Ricketts family. And several of the grandchildren were out here and great-grandchildren were out, and we were able to provide a tour for them, which was great. To have them all together in one spot. We have new docents in there. We've seen a lot of interest from different media groups and different people in the public regarding Pacific Biological Laboratories. Right now, we are having a pause on tours just in terms of number of staff, and regularly we don't hold the second Saturday tours in December for Pacific Biological Laboratories. But we are hoping for next year to make it a little bit easier to book the tour. Right now, the tours, the Saturday tours we have on the library website and the city website for booking tours, but we want to put basically a request button for how people can request tours of Colton Hall and Pacific Biological Laboratories, because school groups do regularly visit Colton Hall especially. And you'll see Francesca did some tours with Carmel High School over there at Pacific Biological Laboratories, but a lot of those people will call us or figure out how to get in touch. We want to make it a little easier for a form for us to manage all of those tour requests that we get on there, and potentially also change the cost. And so I'm looking at that for Pacific Biological Laboratories for next year. Is right now we charge $52.50 for a group to give it a 1 hour tour. And that's if you have basically one person, two person, or basically up to about 18 people. So I'd like to do it so it's more cost recovery for us, because I've been doing a lot of those as myself too. So having possibly like 1 to 4, a certain price, and then each additional person another cost. So we'll be working on that coming up. Presidio Monterey Museum. The sign in front of the building was updated this morning. So just got that updated. It was pretty beat up. And so I'm happy to have that up there and installed. So next time you're by, take a look at that. It's just nice to have that kind of up there. And also there's the city completed a short, I think 120 or 140 foot short retaining wall around the lower Presidio curve just last week. So in terms of with the Army. On the city side of the property, we have the new mobile app, the Monterey Walking Tour, is launched on Apple and Android platforms. During this last period, we had 247 views of that app. And with the library, primarily been working with Andre Scarza on our California Revealed grant, and this is where we sent in the Ray Ruppel images from the 1949 centennial celebration. Those have been digitized and are on the Internet Archive in California Revealed. And we've got approval for Shades of Monterey images. These are images that people donated about and were scanned, I believe, years back. Actually, I believe Commissioner Castagna was probably involved in that process a bit.
I think a lot of them were photographed rather than scanned.
These are photographs. There's 3 versions of Shades of Monterey. So this is, I think, version 3, and those are the ones that were approved. So we're going to get those on the California Revealed site coming up. Just to note, the 4 displays in the downtown parking garage are in need of updating. So I was worked on. We've been working on updating the ones over there that's on Colton Hall. There's another one that had some really out of date information. So I took that down. I had Monterey Peninsula Museum of Art, the Dali Museum, just some information on the websites was all out of date. So I've taken those out. But there's 2 others with California State Parks and Mishpa, each have a display. So I've been in contact with them too about updating those displays and getting those done in the next, like after we get done with Christmas and the Adobes. And then our Monterey Angels have been installed in the city, less than, same as last, maybe a little bit more than last year, but less than in years prior. We have our California State Parks buildings. Those are the ones where we have 9. They're from 1999. The other ones that we hang up are all from 1956. Francesca and I hung up the ones at the OCO Adobe on Alvarado Street. But we brought up the ones at Colton Hall. Monterey Public Library has our regular one. And then the streets department works with the vendor on Lighthouse, Pacific Street, Del Monte, and North Fremont. I will say the ones that we've had outside, even the ones that were restored back in 2016, are in poor shape, in my opinion. The paint and the coating on it is what looks like an orange peel. It starts to really deteriorate based on the rain and the moisture. So I want to highlight that this coming year, I'm really looking forward to, and I've mentioned this to the commission before, but this coming year, I really want to come up with a project to make replicas to hang out on the streets, because the ones on the streets that do get damaged, if they're damaged, a number of them just cannot be hung up anymore. And the ones from the 1970s are too big to hang up. They're basically about 2 feet higher than the 1956 and 1999 ones, and the wood is thinner, so they crack really easy. And people don't see those. People don't get to see them because they're so damaged. And we have stacks of probably 30 to 40, I can get the exact numbers, that are too damaged to hang up. So I would like to go forward in the future with getting replicas made of the current ones on aluminum panels, so we can hang them like other street signs and put them up there, just making photorealistic ones that are safe, and then keeping the original artwork in storage. and bringing those out for art displays or bringing them out to a museum, or gallery or some kind of show where they're safer indoors. But my concern is that if we have another couple wet years, that those wood panels, because they're basically 4x6 wood panels or 4x8 wood panels, that those are going to continue to deteriorate. The paint is going to continue to flake off. And, the last couple times they've done restorations on them, the restoration project only did, I think, 6 or 8 out of the 92 or so that we have in our collection. So I'd like to come up with a plan for next year where we possibly hang more, but we also restore more so that it's easier for us to hang them out there.
Particularly in El Nino this year, so the weather.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I went through and hung up the best ones that I had, and I took photos of everything before I distributed them to make sure that we had records of it. And then council adopted and approved several NCIP projects that may be of interest. This is some of these for the Museums of Cultural Arts: Bruce Harris Way lighting upgrade, the Aeneas Bridge restoration on Cannery Row, Slope Monument restoration on Lower Presidio, and then from the council reports that further review needed on the Shoreline Park fish hopper restoration and signage. So with that, happy to answer any questions, anything.
Where are the angels kept for the rest of the season when they're not hanging?
So we have a garage in the East Garage, which is between Franklin and Del Monte and Tyler, which the downtown garage, the multi-story garage, there's a storage area there in the parking. And
Are they environmentally protected in that storage space?
no,
Okay. We're finding the same thing down at the light station along the coast. It doesn't matter if they're inside or outside. If they are not, the temperature, humidity, and infrared light is not controlled, they continue to deteriorate. So if we could find a space where at least it was heated and the humidity reduced, they would have a longer life.
and that would be a good kind of discussion in terms of our vault or whatever we want to do there, because the vault, because it's the concrete room, the humidity is much better in there than it is in that garage space.
Yeah.
In that garage space, because of the location, and we do have a single room in there where we do have other things, archaeological items from old Colton Hall, pieces of wood. We have different files, and we do have a dehumidifier in there, but it's not temperature controlled. There's no HVAC in that area, and the lighting is just regular 4-foot or 8-foot halogen lights. So whether we took out and highlighted that the angels, because to me the angels over time have been treated as holiday decorations, not so much as art. And that's the thing, is that I think that they're art, and I think that we should treat them like our other art and store them in different areas and store them in that kind of way. And how that's going to be, I'm not sure, but I think at least the first part is documenting. The first part of something like historic artifacts like this is to document what it's at this stage. And I mentioned, and the Commissioner Castagna actually scanned an image for me. There was a box of just documents and photos that were inside the garage storage that needs to be gone through. And I said, I saw some photos from Myron and Dorothy Oliver, and they were over on the wharf. And I said, I wonder if I'll find an old photo of the Western Flyer. And we did. We found it. It's a negative that I don't know if anybody's seen, that had just been sitting in this box for I don't know how many years. And it was scanned, and it needs to work, but it's crisp. What's that?
It's good quality.
Yeah. And
What about the Stanton Center? The city theoretically owns that.
they own the land. It's a 50-year land. So there used to be tennis courts there. So there's a 50-year lease with, so we don't control any of the property. The one kind of site on there is the cafe.
Yeah, I don't think they have much excess storage space there, John, but I was thinking similar to La Mirada, the basement of La Mirada. I went on a tour there years ago. And that's a huge area, the one that faces Fremont Street. And so the Museum of Art may work with us as a storage area. But I don't think Monterey History and Art has any, because they have to store all those costumes when they close down the Perry House. And I just don't think there's any room there, but it's worth asking, Gary.
I've been on a tour there in the back, and I think they're storing a lot of the Joe Mora collection over there at Stanton right now. I mean, we could look, but it's, yeah, their amount of, we have old conference center art, you know, we have a lot of things. So to me, it's really like prioritizing what is in the vault, what's in these sites, what needs to be kept there. They're long-term, there's a lot that needs to kind of go through in terms of storage and identify priorities. But I do think, to me, just scanning and getting photographs and making replicas so that we have an immediate, to me, it's an immediate need for next year for those angels to have replicas made.
They do, State Parks has at least one. I don't know how many of these they have, but it's essentially a shipping container that is secure and it's airtight. So they run AC, heat, dehumidifying in there, and that's where we store some of our things, like the Fresnel lens from the lighthouse is sitting in that thing, so it doesn't deteriorate before we can put it back in the building. So that's kind of a portable thing. There's a cost to buying it, but then you just plug it in. And I think your artifacts are in good shape while they're in there. What's that, Tim?
Finding a place to put it.
Yeah, yeah,
What about,
The one that State Park has, so we get.
yeah.
what about the old OCO Theater? We own that and there's nothing in there. Would that be a storage possibility? I mean, it's heated, air conditioned, or it was.
I haven't been in there, so I'm not entirely sure on that. And I think it's just whether that's Adobe, if it's the structure of it, because if the moisture comes in, like the moisture of the Adobes is not good for different objects like that.
Storage.
So,
Probably too recent to be Adobe.
okay, yeah, I'd have to go in there and look at the construction and what the storage and all that in there. But I do think, you know, for the angels specifically, we just have to have a different storage and bringing some of those other things out and going through the vault at some point and figuring out what is there things that need to be deaccessioned or not, or where should we keep those kind of things in there.
I just have one question. I think this kind of connects. What's the latest in replacing Jordan?
We have interviews scheduled December 12th, I believe, I have an interview panel scheduled. So we had a number of applicants for the position. I did the first review of candidates, sent in my scores to city HR, and I connected with several people. And I don't know if anybody who's applying is listening, so I won't say who the panelists are, but people that are very, I believe, well regarded on the interview panel for this, because it's an external panel, and then it will come back to me and possibly others for a final interview. So I'm looking forward kind of getting those scores within the next week or two.
Very good. Anybody else have any other questions? Any comments? John, you have any?
No, I'm just wondering when the campus is back online.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've been trying to watch some.
City council meeting.
and also, yeah, I didn't know if there was a Comcast issue or what, but I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure. I haven't heard the update on that. I know we're looking at,
Comment?
I was very happy to see that they highlighted the need for a rail on the building side. You know, this Friday, I'm standing down at the foot of that staircase, which I've stood at for a lot of years, because that's a mass casualty waiting to happen. And
Let's hope not.
we've got to get those rails up.
You know, it's interesting. I noticed the photo they had of that in the presentation, and putting a railing there may be necessary, but it's not going to look good. Don't have any other.
Nobody will notice.
John noticed.
I have two quick comments, just as a suggestion on this nonprofit status. I'm not I just wondered if Brian and you and Tim can meet and put on a discussion item. Not that we would be appointing any committee, but just a discussion item with a little bit of background on the Friends of the Library and various alternatives, just so that we're all smarter about it and just as a discussion item, so we can understand it a little bit better. And the second item, you may have noticed a small retaining wall along Lighthouse Curve.
Yeah.
Hans assured me that's only on city property. That's not solving the big gopher problem that led to the Army revoking the city's lease. I think you're aware the Army is going to take back that property in August 2024. Hans told me that he's having the staff do an analysis of that, and it will likely be on the council agenda, I think, in late January, possibly in February. I would ask Brian that when that report goes out, that all the commissioners get a copy. Old Monterey Foundation has spent millions of dollars on improvements in that area. And really, we don't care if it's the city or the Army. We just want the museum to be open, the park to be open, and some further improvements. That's all we're asking. And the Army has not answered those questions. In fact, if you see the Army's letter, they're saying, well, you haven't met all the requirements. And secondarily, we have our own needs for that property, and they haven't said what they are. So I know we've discussed with Brian and the Old Monterey Foundation about that being referred to the commission. I think that's up to the council. They wanted to do that, but the council will be discussing that hopefully with the Army representative at the January or February meeting about that. So again, I think the more important thing is, regardless of who controls the land, is it open to the public? Is the museum going to be kept open? Are there going to be further improvements? Supposedly there are a group of Native Americans, not locally, from outside the area, that would just as soon not have those improvements done and keep it less utilized. So.
John?
I'm glad to hear you're talking about considering some of this stuff that we handle as artifacts and that they need better protection because we'll have them longer, and some of them are valuable historically. So that's good news. And otherwise, I hope everybody has nice holidays.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So my other comment is I hope everyone has a happy holiday and a happy new year. We'll see you all next year. And I close this meeting.